Gracious God, thank you for the whole family, and just get us through the sometimes discouraging days. We know everyone is vacationing and enjoying this beautiful world that you created. Pray that you bless them and bring us back together. Make us a body that would be a light in this community. That people would come to see Jesus and sense Jesus and be ministered to by Jesus through this little body of believers here. We love you, Lord. There is no other one that we commit our lives to other than you. In Jesus' name. All right, this morning we're going to start a new teaching series I'm entitling Life Lessons. I'm going to study through the book of Ecclesiastes. I absolutely love this book. Someone asked me, didn't you just preach or teach through Ecclesiastes? Yes, I did, back in 2008, which really is a scary thing, isn't it? Time has gone that fast. But Ecclesiastes, again, I just love this book. It's written by Solomon in the evening of his life. Solomon is now an old man. He's looking back upon his search for meaning and purpose and satisfaction in life. Ecclesiastes is sort of like a journal written by Solomon in sort of the disillusioned autumn of his life is the way I'd like to say it. He revisits the wreckage of sort of those wasted years. Ecclesiastes can be read as sort of this regretful, retrospective reflection back upon life. This book is unlike any other Old Testament book. It's sort of a philosophical discourse. Solomon will question and evaluate and critique everything around him, very much like the postmodern man questions life and the purpose of life. And Solomon is not going to give quick and easy answers, but he will give answers. He will share, I love that phrase, life lessons. He's going to share life lessons that he has learned along the way. So Solomon writes this book. There's really two purposes in mind. He's writing it to us, to the believer, to teach us about those lessons that he has learned through the painful experiences of life. Ecclesiastes almost has this confessional air about it. It's the confession of a man who has learned the hard ways about the empty promises of this world. Anytime we begin a book, there's always this thought, am I going to understand this book? What we're going to find out, this book understands us. It really gets us when we're honest about all of our doubts and questions and failures. And we're going to learn life lessons. A question that it takes some insight. It takes some transparency. But the question is, what are the lessons of life you have learned? And I want you to think about that. How would you answer that if you were talking to a friend or a coworker or even your children? And as we get older, what are the lessons of life you have learned? It can be a very deep, a very intimate question. So Ecclesiastes is written for us, it's written for the believer, but my sense is it's written to the non-believer, to the secular humanist in every generation. And Solomon is challenging the skeptic to carefully consider the meaning of life. And that piece, that's the work of breaking up the fallow ground. I guess you could say it that way. The hardness of people's hearts. And you want to be effective evangelistically in their life and get them to come to know Jesus as Savior. But with the secular mindset today, this very humanistic mindset, we have got to start where they're at. And where they're at is right where Ecclesiastes is at. If we're going to be effective in life, we have to challenge all of their presuppositions about what is the meaning of life. That's where we're headed. Ecclesiastes, 12 chapters long, and I'm going to try to complete this in 12 weeks, which brings us right up to almost Christmas. Isn't that a depressing thought? We're not that far away from Christmas. So here we go, Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verse 1, finding meaning under the sun, life lessons. The word of the teacher, son of David, king of Jerusalem. And instead of teacher, perhaps we could insert the word searcher or seeker or philosopher, because that's really what the role Solomon is taking as he writes the book. Just a little bit of information about this guy, Solomon, King Solomon. Up to this point in history, he's the richest guy on the face of the earth. He really is. He's the Bill Gates of 10th century BC. Solomon had it all. That's the first thing. The second thing is, Solomon was known for his wisdom. 1 Kings chapter 4, we read, God gave Solomon wisdom and very great insight and a depth of understanding as measureless as the sand of the seashore. Solomon's wisdom was greater than all of the people of the East, greater than the wisdom of Egypt. He was wiser than anyone else. Past tense, I guess. Because it seems that he has come to a period in his life where everything that was shiny has kind of lost its luster. Probably midlife years, he begins to reevaluate life. He questions, he doubts, and rather than cling to the wisdom that God has given him, he becomes this seeker, this philosopher. And the third thing important to know about Solomon, Solomon had 300 wives and 700 other women in his harem. And the Bible says that his wives turned his heart away from God to serve false gods. It was Socrates who said, by all means get married. If you get a good wife, you'll become very happy. If you get a bad one, you'll become a philosopher. And Solomon becomes a philosopher. Verse 2, here's his conclusion about life as a philosopher. Meaningless, meaningless, says the teacher. Utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless. That's a cheery way to start a book. But in Jewish writing, it was customary to put the most important point, to put the conclusion up right at the very beginning. So Solomon is saying, I want you to know, first of all, that in my search for meaning and purpose and satisfaction in life, the conclusion I've come to, everything is meaningless. And in saying that, Solomon is meeting the unbelieving skeptic on his own ground. It's as if he is saying, okay, let's just assume that God is non-existent. But if God is out of the picture, well, who's in the picture? And how's that really working for you? What does life become without God? It becomes meaningless. It's as if Solomon is saying, I've tried it all, and everything I've tried leaves me unsatisfied. The word meaningless in the Hebrew language is the word hebel, like that. It means something fleeting, something insubstantial, something inconsequential. I can't say that word. Inconsequential. It bears no weight. It's here for a moment, and then it's gone. Hebel. It's the same word that was used by Adam and Eve to name their second son. Adam and Eve had a son, Cain, and then a son, Abel, Hebel. And, you know, Cain murdered Abel. Hebel, the word emphasizes the shortness, the pointlessness of life. Just this puff of wind, a mere breath, it's gone. We will encounter the word meaningless 37 times in this book. Key phrase, meaningless. And notice too, the word meaningless in verse 2 was repeated. Meaningless, meaningless, he says. And in ancient Hebrew writing, if you wanted to emphasize a word, you just repeated the word. For example, I always use this as an illustration. There's a place in the Psalms where the psalmist says, life was really the pits, I guess you'd say. He was in that pit. We even use that phrase kind of today. But he was really depressed. And so what he actually says in the Hebrew text is, life is the pit. It's really down. Not just in the pit, you're in the pit. It is that meaningless and that dark. And so meaningless is Solomon's way of saying life is meaningless to the max. So the first phrase you need to understand is meaningless. There's a second key phrase in the book of Ecclesiastes, and that's the expression, under the sun. We're going to see it in the very next verse, verse 3, and then we're going to see it 29 times in this book. When Solomon refers to something as being under the sun, he's talking about this observable world, the visible world apart from God. Under the sun is the perspective we are left with when we take God out of the picture. And all of the pessimistic comments, all those depressing comments we read in Ecclesiastes are with those words as the boundary. That's the frame of reference. Under the sun is the framework of secular thinking. It is life bound only by the span of our years from birth to death, from cradle to the grave. Under the sun, life is meaningless, empty. Ernest Hemingway put it this way: life is a dirty trick, a short journey from nothingness to nothingness. By the end of the 19th century, a philosopher named Friedrich Nietzsche had formulated a philosophy of nothingness called nihilism. Yeah, I am a nihilist. Nihilism, from the Latin word nihil, which means nothing. Nihilism is the belief that all values are baseless. Nihilism, often associated with extreme pessimism and radical skepticism that condemns even existence. Okay, all beliefs, all values are baseless. It's nothingness. I fear no God, I fear no man, I seek no heaven, I fear no hell, I have no heroes, I have no faith, I bow before no one, I'm a nihilist. And Nietzsche, in arguing for nihilism, said that its corrosive effect will eventually destroy all moral, religious, and metaphysical convictions and lead to the greatest crisis in human history. And you look at the growing chaos in our society, the outrage, the growing anarchy of groups like Antifa, for example, and you go, Nietzsche's predictions appear to be coming to pass, because I can't think of a better sort of philosophical label to apply to that segment of society than nihilism. Everything is meaningless. It's nothingness to them. There are no values. The thinking of nihilistic philosophy is undermining virtually all the systems in our society. And by somewhere in the mid-20th century and growing, nihilistic themes such as values destruction and the purposelessness of the universe sort of became the consistent theme in so many of the songs and in the social critics, the philosophers, even education. So, Do the facts of Solomon's thesis, namely that life is meaningless under the sun, does that bear out? So Solomon presents sort of a summary of his case in the opening verses. Life is meaningless. Verse 3. Here's the evidence. What do people gain from all their labors at which they toil under the sun? By the way, you'll see Solomon ask questions over and over in this book. A Socratic sort of method of getting you to really think about what he's saying. Notice the commercial language that he uses in verse 3. What do people gain? What's the personal gain? What's the yield for all that a person puts into life? What's the return? And the teacher's conclusion is, this life, it doesn't pay dividends. All the toil, all the drudgery, quite frankly, it's just boring. Life is all about punching in and punching out. And you punch in and punch out again. And the next day you punch in and you punch out. It's Monday, and then it's Tuesday, and then it's Wednesday. And finally, you just punch out for the last time. Irrespective of your profession, the fact is, life is possessed by this inherent monotony, just dreadful drudgery. Paul McCartney wrote a song. John Lennon wrote it with him. I think it was just another day. And the lyrics read, every day she takes a morning bath, she wets her hair, wraps a towel around her as she's headed for the bedroom chair. It's just another day. Slipping in the stocking, stepping in shoes, dipping in the pockets of her raincoat. It's just another day. At the office where the papers grow, and she takes a break, drinks another coffee, and she finds it hard to stay awake. It's just another day. And oftentimes our lives are marked by that kind of monotony, the same repetitive routine. You punch in, you punch out. It's that boring daily grind, the empty routine. It's meaningless. As Thoreau wrote, men live lives of quiet desperation. None of our endeavors, apart from God, can supply life with any sort of significance and meaning. And that's why we find so many songs about the quest, the search for meaning, and then the frustration of that quest. We should play trivia and karaoke here, but dust in the wind. All we are is dust in the wind. 1977, the group was Kansas. You know, I know the lyrics of the song aren't as deep as like Justin Bieber kind of stuff, but you got to go. That song's pretty deep. Solomon could have penned those words, but I just shut off. Tells me I'm out of battery.
Really?
The song is about the emptiness, the meaninglessness of life. Dust in the wind. All we are is dust. It's depressing. Verse 3, Solomon is asking, what gain, what profit, what lasting satisfaction does a person have from all his labor which he toils after we've tried the experience, after we've sucked dry all the pleasure out of that experience? What is really left? What is left to sort of satisfy the thirst in our life? And his answer is zip, zero, nada, nothing. Here we go. And the reason why? The reason why is because you're looking at life under the sun, apart from God. Life is cradle to grave, and that's it. Verse 4, generations come and generations go, but the earth remains forever. Solomon is apprising us of the perpetuity of this problem. The problem of meaningless under the sun. It doesn't go away. A new generation comes along, and it doesn't come up with some new secret formula. The problem doesn't go away. We go away. And he looks at life and he goes, it's meaningless. Verse 5. The sun rises and the sun sets and hurries back to where it rises. The wind blows to the south and turns to the north. Round and round it goes, ever returning on its course. All streams flow into the stream, yet flow into the sea, yet the sea is never full. To the place the streams come from, there they will return again. Talking about that evaporation cycle of nature. You can hear the cynicism, you can hear the fatalism in his voice as he looks. He's looking at the predictability of life and nature. And again, keep in mind, Solomon is showing us nature from the perspective of someone who denies there is a creator, that there is this wise designer. And the verdict is that life is just as monotonous as those repetitive cycles of nature. The sun rises, the sun sets. Sunrise, sunset. The wind blows, and then it turns around and it blows in the other direction. And Old Man River just keeps rolling along. And so what's the point? That's all the unbeliever can say about the subject. What's the point? You know, when Jeremiah the prophet observed the same thing, the orderliness of the heavens and of the seasons and the daily sunrise and the daily sunset, to him it spoke about the faithfulness of God, the dependability of God, the creative wisdom of God. It's amazing. Two people can look at the same very thing and come up with such opposite conclusions. What's the reason why? Because Jeremiah was looking above the sun. He saw life through the perspective of life with a creator and a designer, and there is God. And Solomon at this point is taking the perspective of that unbelieving skeptic. He's looking at life under the sun, a life apart from God, and his conclusion is it's all meaningless. Cradle to grave, it's meaningless. Verse 8. All things are wearisome, more than one can say. The eye never has enough seeing, nor the ear is filled of hearing. You can just hear Solomon sigh. All things are wearisome. What a drag. The unsatiated appetite, the inexpressible exhaustion of life. All things are wearisome. The eye is not satisfied. The ear is not filled with hearing. In other words, whatever we desire, it can't fulfill us. It satisfies us, in fact, less and less, because we're impacted by these two universal laws. The first one, the law of unfulfilled expectations, and the other one, the law of diminishing returns. When we finally get what we want, we find out it really didn't give us that sense of meaning or purpose, satisfaction we thought it was going to give us. So many songs come out of the book of Ecclesiastes. Years ago, Peggy Lee sang the song, same sentiment. She sang about young love and children and marriage and even life and death. And at the end of each stanza, there's this hopeless lament. Is that all there is? If that's all there is, let's keep dancing. Let's break out the booze. Yes, let's self-medicate to cover up the pain of the meaningless existence. That's what the song is saying. So the law of diminishing returns then hits true. We enjoy something. We delight in something. But over time, the return lessens, and sometimes we even get sick of something we once delighted in. It begins to bore us. It exhausts us, it drains us, it cannot satisfy. Everything in life becomes wearisome apart from God. 1965, Mick Jagger was singing a song, "I Can't Get No Satisfaction." Yeah, I'm really dating myself, but I played that song in a little cool band. Boy, in 1972, we were loud and awful, but we played "I Can't Get No Satisfaction." In 1975, in an interview with People magazine, Mick Jagger said, "I'd rather be dead than singing Satisfaction when I'm 45. I think he's about 120 now. And he's still singing, "I Can't Get No Satisfaction." Actually, he's 65. And it's only rock and roll, but I like it, yeah. Verse 9. What has been will be again. What has been will be again. What has been done will be done again. There is nothing new under the sun. That's where that expression comes from, Ecclesiastes. There's nothing new under the sun. Is there anything of which one can say, look, this is something new? It was here already, long ago. It was here before our time. Solomon's saying, it's the same old, same old. That's what he's saying there. Sounds pessimistic, but that is life from the framework of under the sun. When you rule out God, all you're left with is just the same old, same old. Verse 11. No one remembers the former generations, and even those yet to come will not be remembered by those who follow them. Meaning and significance cannot be found by being remembered. He's saying, are you living to leave a legacy? Well, forget that, because they're going to forget you. They won't remember you no matter how important you think you are in this life. Now, what does it matter? Apart from God, the teacher says, our approach to life will either be bitter and cynical and pessimistic, or it's going to be very trite, shallow, unrealistic, naive. Thoroughly depressed yet? Don't you just love Ecclesiastes? Solomon is asking an essential question, and the question is there life before death? Or is this all there is? Is there life before death? And the world right now, the non-believing world, is searching for that answer. Is there something that gives life meaning? Is there something to satisfy the void in the human heart? And we know the answer. The answer was given by Augustine so eloquently years ago, but Augustine answered, you, O Lord, have made us for yourself. And our hearts are restless until we rest in you. If you're looking for rest anywhere else, you won't find it. If you're looking for satisfaction, you're not going to find it. That's the conclusion, but that's a number of chapters away. Is there life before death? The reason I love this book is because I think it is so honest. This is the secular, non-believing mindset. And if we as a church want to be relevant in the world, we need to be able to think from their perspective. Or we may need to sort of drive them to the logical conclusion of what their lifestyle, their choices are in life. Is there life after death? For those asking that question, we would say, yes, there was a man who said, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. There's a man who said, I have come that you might have life, and you might have it purposefully, meaningfully. I am the door. I am the gate to that life. See how relevant that I Am series was? Right there, 2 examples. Yes, there is life. And we will get there in this book. But this book is going to equip us and make us, and it's going to empower us so that we can have those discussions with the skeptic. You know what time it is? It's time for me to punch out. I kind of think why I would punch out permanently if I was coming from that point of view that Solomon is writing about, because that one image was so accurate. Cradle to grave, it really is meaningless apart from God. Why am I here? What's the purpose in life? Every person that has any sort of depth at all has that question hidden somewhere in the back of their heart. What's the point of it all? And if those questions aren't answered satisfactorily, it's going to result in just depression and disappointment. And we see that on a daily basis. That's part of what is behind this chaos, this growing chaos in our society right now. This is a society that lives under the sun. And if they are forced to the logical conclusion of what they believe, it's meaningless. And whether they use those words right now, that's what they're living out. Okay, so again, my hope in this study is it's going to equip us, it's going to empower us to speak to that society. So once again, Wednesday evening, a study at 7 o'clock, and we're going to begin this week and use this series as the basis for our discussion. I'll provide just a few questions to get the discussion started, but really it's going to be sort of led by you, the questions you might have, the insights you might have. I know perhaps you want to evaluate the lyrics of Dust in the Wind this week. Be a great assignment. Or come prepared to talk about what are the life lessons you would say. I mean, seriously. Dig deep. Get genuine. Get transparent. If you're going to give advice to your kids, to a friend about, imagine you're old like me and you're giving advice from the wisdom of your years. What are the life lessons? Great question. Great question. And so it might be really helpful if I'm not emailing my notes to you, you have to tell me. Email my notes on Monday morning. You'll be prepared for Wednesday night. And if nothing else, it's just great value in building some community and some relationships. Let's pray. Gracious Father, thanks for your word. Perhaps, Father, we've walked so long with you and we've thought for so long from this perspective of you as the creator, the existence of God, that we have a hard time even associating, thinking the way the skeptic, the philosopher of this world does right now. We want you to equip us. We want to be effective in communicating the good news. So I pray to that end in this series. And through the despair of this book, we contrast it with the joy of knowing a Savior. The peace and the rest we have, and we're just so grateful for that. In Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, let's just stand and sing this song. We have a very personal God, a God who knows our name, and we're going to end with that thought.